Hey guys, Abby, Hades' daughter here. Welcome to my kitchen. So, what I am going to be doing today is I'm going to be making breakfast for my fiance and I. This is my stove. What I plan to make is an omelet and a scrambled bacon sandwich. I use 2 pans, one for bacon, one for sausage, and the other one for the eggs. It makes it so much easier to do that because one needs to be cooked on a lower temperature compared to the bacon and the sausage. So here's my bacon, here's my sausage. I do not use all of it. I only use half the sausage and half the bacon. And with that bacon, I do finely chop it. I finally chop it because it makes it easier on me so that I don't have to chop it up later, because it just turns it into bacon bits. So once I finish chopping up the bacon, I do kind of break the meat up a little bit. And then after I break up the meat, I stick it in the pan. Once I get the bacon in the pan, then I end up turning that on a medium-high heat so that I can start cooking. Once it kind of loosens up like this, I take my tongs, you can use a spatula or tongs, doesn't matter, and break up the bacon some more. You don't want the bacon sticking to each other because if you plan to make it crispy like I do, it ends up becoming a problem later where half of it's cooked and half of it's not. So continuously stirring once you're done with your bacon to your liking. You put it in a paper towel lined plate or dish. And then I did dump out the bacon grease so that I had a dry pan to put the sausage in. It makes the sausage less greasy when you don't mix it with the bacon grease. I did not end up putting in here the finished sausage just because I was too focused on making Esme's eggs at the time because she doesn't like her eggs burnt or brown, little crispy. We don't like that. So instead, here I am chopping up some onions, and I'm going to be chopping up a jalapeno pepper. This pepper is Esme's favorite. When you chop up the pepper and the onions, you want to finely chop them, as I did here. When you finely chop them, it makes it easier to cook down, because you only want to cook them down until they're about translucent, which I will show you in a second here. Once you finish dicing up your onions, you're going to move on to the pepper. I am thinly slicing this pepper so that I can chop it up easier, as you can see. Now that that's been finely chopped, I am going to take these peppers and onions and put them in a pan with butter. Now, I cook with butter because it doesn't burn the onions and the peppers. And then if I use oil, though, it would make the peppers and onions burn, which don't taste good in an omelet. So on a medium-lowish heat, medium to medium-low, you want to have the butter melt in the pan with your onions and your peppers so that they start cooking until they're just about translucent. So here I have the onions and peppers. They are just about translucent, so I took them out of the pan at this point since they were ready. And then I did clean out the pan so that I can make Esme's omelet. Now, with this pan, I did put in a tablespoon of butter. And then once that was done melting, I did add in the egg. Now, I do season the egg prior to it being put into the pan, and I did season the onions and peppers. You don't want to over season it, so if you're going to plan on seasoning it after you put it into the pan, don't season it prior. You don't want to over season the eggs just because the eggs will hold in most of the flavor. Once the egg starts to cook a little bit more around the edges, as you can see here, how it's starting to cook on the edges, that's when you want to start adding in the other ingredients for the omelet. So I had set aside the onions and the peppers, and so I'm just adding them back into the pan. I did make too much for the onions and peppers, so the omelet was a little overstuffed, but that's okay. Extra veggies are good for you. After you add in the veggies, then you're going to take some cheese and put the cheese right on top. Once I grab that cheese, I do have shredded cheddar cheese on hand just because we use it a lot. So here I topped it off with some cheddar cheese, and then I did go get the bacon and add that into it as well. And then I did add in 2 sausage links. I wish I would have chopped up the sausage links at the time, but I was worried about her omelet overcooking. So, added in some more bacon here. I did end up having to cut up a little bit more bacon and add it in just because there wasn't enough for Esme and I together. This is where I started getting worried because you see where the egg is now starting to bubble off the side of the pan there. The egg is now starting to get a little too hot. What I was doing here is trying to make it so that the inside the egg would cook more if I moved it on the outside. It wasn't really working to my advantage, which I did end up stop trying and just letting it cook. And then once the sausage was done, I did put a couple of links here. The one thing that you want to watch out for when you're doing this is that you're not overcooking your egg. So when you see your egg starting to lift off the pan like this, that's when you need to flip it. Or not flip it, so say you gotta sort of fold it over. I did have to use a spatula just because I did have too much of the egg. And I was worried about it tearing, which it did end up tearing. Sometimes when you add in the cheese like this, the cheese can make it harder for the egg to cook. So here I was trying to make sure that all the egg was cooked prior to me getting it out of the pan. And for Esme, this meal has to be entirely made of keto. So she doesn't have toast or hash browns or anything like that to go with this when I make it. Once I finish up with that, I did move it to a plate and she did very much enjoy it. Now here I am finally making my breakfast. I always like to make sure that Esme's breakfast is made first because she needs to take her medication before her day can get started. So I'm cracking 3 eggs into a pan, and I do end up adding bacon and cheese to the eggs before I scramble it. It's just taking me a moment here to get all the ingredients, just because I have them placed in different places. I did end up seasoning the eggs with salt and pepper before I ended up scrambling it, which my preferred method for scrambling is cracking the eggs in the pan, breaking the yolks, as you can see here, and then mixing it all together. For me, it just tastes better this way. Now, because Esme's eggs, I did have to use peppers, and I can't have spicy food, I did have to switch my pan over to the bacon pan. It did end up cooling down in enough time so that I could use it, so I didn't overcook my eggs. Now, once your eggs have scrambled enough, like this, I do end up adding in cheddar cheese. After the cheddar cheese has been added into the pan, then you let that cheese melt and continuously scrambling the eggs. Continuously scrambling the eggs helps it to not burn. Sometimes when I am mixing my eggs, I like to sit here and go mix, 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 just because it makes it go faster, in my opinion. And it's also fun. As the cheese is melting, as you can see here, it is now coming together. I smooth it out just so that it cooks finer. Toast my bagels in the pan, and here we have it, my finished breakfast. Thanks for joining me.